We still got to enjoy Hawaii without having the feelings of living paycheck to paycheck.
Looking back, our time in Hawaii were some of the most special years of our marriage, and it's just a huge part of our story.
Big lesson learned, you cannot time the market, it's time in the market.
It's not about the little mistakes, it's about the disciplines and the things that add up over a lifetime. Welcome back to the Fiscal Clinician Podcast, where we empower healthcare professionals to build wealth, crush debt, and achieve financial independence. I'm your host, Josh Schien, financial coach and owner of Fiscal Clinician.
And I'm Devon McCord, your co-host. We're both physical therapists turned financial coaches, and we're on a mission to help healthcare professionals take control of their money and build a debt-free lifestyle.
Yeah, so before we start today's episode, I have an exciting announcement that fiscalclinician.com is now up and running. So you can check out the website, schedule one-on-one free consults from here, and get that coaching session up and running with me so you can live the life you love with your money. Now, before we get started on today's episode, I figured it would be fun to do a little icebreaker. Everyone makes stupid financial decisions. It's not a matter of if, but more a matter of when. So I figured it'd be fun for me and Devon to be a little bit vulnerable about some of the dumb financial stuff that we've done, because no one is immune, right? So Devon, is there anything that comes to mind for you when thinking about financial mistakes you've made?
Yeah, where do I even start? There's so many financial mistakes I've made in my time. I definitely think that one of them was when I first started investing back in 2015, I started to look at stocks, and one of them was NVIDIA, which was a giant chip making company. And they were getting ready to put chips in all new computers. And I saw that future was going to happen. So I was like, all right, I'll put like $2,000 into this stock. And it basically doubled by 2016. So I had like 4,000 in there, and I'm like, all right, sweet. This is awesome. I should sell it. I made some money, right? And fast forward to today, that same amount of money, it hurts for me to say this, but that same amount of money would equate to $800,000. $800,000 off a $2,000 investment. And so big lesson learned, you cannot time the market, it's time in the market. And if you have foresight in the future of investing in stocks, you got to kind of go with your gut and stick with it for a while. And then my other one was actually signing up for a Macy's credit card. And oh man, that was probably only like a couple years ago. I signed up just because I was buying a bunch of new clothes at Macy's. And then they're like, you can sign up and get a 10% discount. And I'm like, oh, perfect. So I like went ahead and did that. And then I told my wife, and she's like, what? You signed up for a Macy's credit card? What are you thinking? And I'm like, well, I wanted the 10% discount. She was just like, no, that's like the worst credit card you can have, and I started reading that book, I'll Teach You to Be Rich. And I got it right here on my desktop, right? And it talks about big mistake is those little credit cards. Those credit cards can actually ruin your credit. It can make it worse. And it doesn't help to build the credit. So those were my big mistakes, hands down.
Yeah, I think you made a great point too for our listeners just about investing long term. Everybody wants to get rich quick scheme, and it doesn't exist. I mean, you can play around with crypto, you can play around with stocks. And if you want to play around with it with some fun money, cool. Like that's great. We're talking like 3 to 5% of your net worth or something like that. Go for it, right? But don't be sitting there expecting to make millions or $800,000 on NVIDIA, right? Because again, it's all about starting investing early, time in the market, not timing the market. So I love that point, Devon. And we'll get into credit cards. I'm excited to do a credit card episode probably in the next handful of episodes. But yeah, stupid mistakes for me. This one hurts just because I remember I was so excited about, I tried to buy an Apple Watch off of, I can't remember if it was eBay or something. And the guy was essentially being like, hey, I only take Google Pay for payment. Did a red flag go off? Yes. Did I ignore said red flag? Yes, I did. And so he sent me like a tracking ID and everything, and it was kind of legit. Like he was a good scammer, but I definitely fell for the scam. It was a too good to be true price for the Apple Watch, and I ended up losing like over $200. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So none of us are immune to it. We're all just dumb with our finances sometimes, and that's okay. But it's not about the little mistakes. It's about the disciplines and the things that add up over a lifetime, right? And so that's what we want to focus on. Today's episode is a fun one, though. We're talking about how we both picked up and moved to Hawaii, one of the most expensive places to live in the United States, and how we not only survived, but thrived on a PT salary. I think the biggest thing about Hawaii, people don't realize, like for PT, but a lot of jobs, the cost of living does not often offset how much you're getting paid. You're getting paid okay, and the cost of living's insane. But that doesn't still mean that you can't make it work really well. And it doesn't mean you can't thrive in Hawaii too and have an amazing time.
Yeah, I completely agree. This episode's going to be awesome. We're going to be talking about some conscious budget spending plans and generating a good plan, or how did we kind of start our budgeting, and also going to talk to you guys about some sacrifices we made to live in a high cost area and how we still got to enjoy Hawaii without having the feelings of living paycheck to paycheck. So whether you dreamed about living in Hawaii or you just want to learn how to manage your money in a high cost area, this episode is 100% for you. So Josh, let's get started. How did your adventure to the Hawaii lifestyle begin?
Yeah, so my story starts with my wife. I met her as I was finishing physical therapy school. She was finishing medical school at the time. And what she did is she did a HPSP program where she basically had the Army pay for medical school in order to not be in $300,000+ of debt. And she ended up getting stationed in Hawaii. And so I had two main options. I could either chase her down to Hawaii, or I could keep living my life in my hometown. And I get a lot of flack for this because people are like, oh, what a hard decision to move to Hawaii. And I'm like, shut up. At this point, we were dating for like, I think it was 4 or 5 months. And it was already getting to the point where we're both taking this a lot more seriously. But it is the reality of like all of my nuclear family was in one area within like an hour, hour and a half. My brother was a few hours away. And I was the only one to even consider moving this far away, right? And so it's like, do I want to be 4,000+ miles away from my family in the Midwest? No, I didn't. But I also was like, you know what? This is an opportunity of a lifetime. I can definitely see myself with this woman. And so I chased down my dreams and my now wife, and I could not have made a better decision. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made. And looking back, our time in Hawaii were some of the most special years of our marriage. And it's just a huge part of our story. So yeah, we love our time in Hawaii. What about you though, Devin? What pulled you out to Hawaii initially?
Yeah, so basically, like my parents used to vacation there every 2 years or so. My dad would stack up his money, stack up his paid time off, and then take us to Hawaii for a couple weeks, sometimes 3 weeks to a month in the summer. And we truly enjoyed it. We snorkeled, we did a lot of some touristy things and non-touristy things, and really enjoyed it. Every time I went, I always felt like I had a calling to go back and help that community. And so basically when I graduated PT school, we were in search of like living a healthy and adventurous lifestyle, and Hawaii was a big option on the table, and so was San Diego. So we had some decisions to make, and we were living in Illinois at the time and tired of those freezing cold weather. So we decided to just kind of calculate what it would be like to live in Illinois versus what it would be like to live in Hawaii, and what do those costs look like to us, and can we make a budget that would fit well for both of us and allow us to thrive in Hawaii as well. So that's kind of when we started to build a budget. Before we even left Illinois, we started to look at all the cost of living expenses and make sure that we weren't just going to live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking that it'll work out without a plan. They're like, oh, yeah, we'll figure it out. Like, I can find a job. I have a job that transports easily. But Hawaii, man, it's a different animal out there. I mean, it's super expensive. I had no idea what I was getting into initially. And thank God, again, I did a cost analysis of what is it going to look like living here? Can I find ways to make it happen? But the cost adds up fast. And I just want to give us a quick snapshot of average costs of Hawaii. And then Devin's going to go into a little bit more detail of what him and his wife made work back in 2016. And so if you're looking at all the islands, average cost of living for a single 1-bedroom place is anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 a month. And then if you looked for like a family of 4, 2 to 3 bedroom, 2-bath-ish, 1 or 2 bath, you're looking at $2,500 to $4,500, which is pretty crazy. And that's just cost of living, of housing, oftentimes without utilities, water, electric, etc. When we look at groceries for a single person, it's around $500 to $700 a month. That sounds like a lot. It's because it is. And even if you're thrifty with Costco, Sam's Club, it's still up around there. When I was living by myself before my wife and I moved in together, I think I was probably around the $500 to $600 range. So on the lower end, but still definitely within that range. And the statistics for a family of four are 12 to 1500 plus. So, I mean, just a lot for groceries too. I think groceries and housing and I mean, really everything is expensive there. So definitely something you have to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is utilities, water, electric, AC, garbage, all that good stuff. For a single person is around $250 to $350. If you look at a family of four, it's closer to $400 to $700. And oh my gosh, man, electricity in Hawaii is nuts. It is definitely one of the most expensive places to have any type of electricity. And I have a story about my wife had all of her bridesmaids stay with her the week before the wedding for, I think it was like 4 days. And in that 4 days, normally we don't run the AC much. We ran the AC more, not even overnight though, just more so they could be comfortable. Our normal electric bill was around 150, 160 bucks a month, which isn't like crazy, but it's certainly not cheap. But that month, dude, it was over $630.
My gosh.
And granted, Hawaii infrastructure is not made for central AC, so these are independent units, but there was like 8 girls in there. So they were running it again though, not even overnight. So yeah, Hawaii Electric is nuts. So, but anyway, Devin, why don't you tell us, what things cost when you guys moved there back in 2016 and if you want to fill in a little bit about like your current situation, go for it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, 2016 was a much different animal in terms of cost of living expenses. A lot of things have changed. And so I'm going to go with the numbers that I had in 2016 and the kind of the numbers that I looked at before I even made the decision to move out there. And a lot of these numbers turned into actual numbers on my budget sheet. So our monthly target in total for the budget for living expenses was $2,000 a month. So when I'm talking about fixed living expenses, I'm talking about the cost of rent. I'm looking at the electricity, your internet, your cable. So I kept a budget of like $2,000 a month for both of us total. We're going to lose it right off the bat. Every first of the month, it's gone. And that's just to live, right? And so at the time, the fair market value for a 2-bedroom in Hawaii was around $1,800 per month. So we kind of focused more on the 1-bedroom rents, which were around $1,000 to $1,200 a month. And that usually did not include internet or electricity because, no one wants to put electricity as part of like the bill, right? Because everybody's going to run electricity different. But all in all, we basically monitored it out and it was usually around $200 max per month. So total is around $1,400 per month for the rent, and then just for the internet and electricity. And so we kind of started with that, and then looked at parking. Parking stalls was another important thing, even in Hawaii. Yeah, the parking stall can run from $100 to $300 a month, which is just insane when you
Parking's
think.
nuts in Hawaii.
Or you're going to have to find street parking and then walk 15, 20 minutes to your house every day. So it was more of a luxury. Parking is a luxury in Hawaii, right? So we actually didn't have to worry about that because we decided to bike instead, which we'll get a little bit more into that. So the next topic I kind of looked at was groceries with my wife and did a budget for groceries of around $350 to $400. And compared to the mainland, you're talking 30 to 50% higher on average for those costs. But the thing with those numbers is you can still thrive if you have a plan and you can still learn to control that. We looked at getting a Costco membership and making sure that most of our food that we bought was from Costco. So we could track it a lot easier. We had this nice receipt where we could see our eggs, our gas, our bread, everything all under one receipt. So I like that because it kind of kept me, in control of a lot of the food expenses. So as a couple, we were spending around $300, $400 a month in groceries. But I also felt like we were living like Costco kings and queens. We were eating steaks, we were eating good chicken, and, we definitely felt like we were thriving and eating well and still enjoying that lifestyle. So total, we kind of kept it around $500 per month. And that included eating out, grabbing a coffee or going to a little restaurant, little date night, things like that. So But yeah, let me remind everyone that prices in Hawaii have significantly changed. And I can elaborate more into this, but I want our audience to know that the principles of budgeting still remain the same, whether it's today or 2016. The biggest expenses in our budget are cost of living expenses. And shout out to Costco. Costco can be an absolute budget saver, especially when making a plan for groceries in a high cost state like Hawaii.
Yeah, I love how huge of a thing the culture of Costco is in Hawaii. Like everybody's a Costco person. But then there's like the cults of the Costco people versus the few people that are Sam's Club and they're all like getting at it together. Or some people you got both, right? It's so sad. My wife and I miss Hawaii a lot. We're in Louisiana now and we're sad because the closest Costco is like 2.5 hours. So it's in Baton Rouge. It's not even close. But we're like, you know what? We're keeping that membership because, I mean, plug for Costco travel, incredible deals.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to do a little vacation here coming up soon from Costco travel. And so we've got some great stuff. But that's another great point in planning with groceries, like Devin talked about generally, as well as money. You want a plan for your groceries each month and each week. The biggest things that are super helpful in maintaining cheap groceries is taking inventory of what you have. Can't tell you how many people buy extras, or we still are guilty of this sometimes, buying extras of something you already had because you didn't take inventory. Going to the store with a list and a plan is really huge for avoiding overspending, and stick to your list. Don't impulse 7 things that you weren't planning on, especially if you're trying to run a tighter budget. If that's not a goal of yours and it's important for you to spend what you want at the grocery store, you're not in a bunch of debt, then good on you. That's totally fine. But if you're trying to tighten things up, that's definitely something you want to work on. Sometimes I suggest using curbside pickup for being able to avoid the impulses because a lot of places now have free delivery sometimes or curbside pickup, and you can't impulse on the things you don't see, right? So that's really helpful. Buying generic too is really helpful when it doesn't affect the taste. I will say there's certain things like ketchup or condiments that I'm just like, oh, the generic sucks, right? I'm not asking you to get the sucky generic stuff, but simple things like beans and salt and pepper, or spices, things that I don't think really make a huge difference. That's kind of what to capitalize on. And then the last thing with the groceries is buying frozen meats and veggies is huge. In Hawaii, fresh chicken thighs were about $4.25 to $4.50 a pound. But if you bought it frozen, you could get it for like $2.10, $2.15 a pound. And it's just, you have to think ahead. You have to thaw things out, but that's a huge difference. And so I think it just goes to show you being intentional and having a plan with both your money and your groceries is really helpful so that you can just stay on track, especially if you're trying to have a more lean budget.
Exactly. Like I really like that you go into how you're basically controlling your food, right? You're managing an inventory. You're almost talking like you're managing a business. We need to make sure that we're sticking to a certain amount of budgeting for eating because we could get lost in the sauce with that. And we could lose a lot of money in just going out, spending a coffee on Starbucks, $5 a day, multiply that by 30 days is $150 a month. And when we look at clients' budgets, the 3 biggest areas we find the margin are always in housing, cars, and eating out. So always start by trying to find ways to make some lifestyle sacrifices to see if you can cut back on those expenses so you can instantly free up money for those things that really matter to you.
I think what Devin just said is really important. You're trying to free up room for what matters to you because maybe you're already past the point where you're not paying on debts anymore and you can live with more freedom. And so you want to spend $500-$600 a month on eating out. That's totally fine, guys, especially if you're in a financial place where you're saving, you're investing consistently. But, you know, when we're talking about trying to get people out of debt, trying to get them on track with their finances, sometimes we want to slim down. And that's where you find the most money is those 3 categories. And so with cars specifically, speaking of cars, we want to talk about some of the sacrifices me and Devin made to save a lot of money on car payments and expenses. So Devin, what were some sacrifices you made with your car?
Well, I sold it. I basically got rid of it before I even left. So it was a huge sacrifice, right? Like you're going to go move to an island. You're going to have no control over how you can get around. But, I saw that as like, hey, if I sold my car, Althea sold her car too, my wife. And we looked at that as, okay, if we sell our cars and we just bike everywhere, hey, we could save money on car expenses. That includes a car payment. It includes gas, insurance, and maintenance. And that adds up real fast, right? So selling my car, it was a great decision. I mean, me and my wife, we bike to work for 2 years every day. Sometimes we'd even bike together to work. We'd also bike to surf, or we'd bike to Costco and bring all the food back. And so we kind of made it a fun thing, right? We had made it into, let's enjoy this. Let's take each moment. Let's bike around and really enjoy Hawaii for what it's worth. But like that sacrifice turned into something even better in the future. And that money became more useful elsewhere, which I'll also talk about a little bit later.
Yeah, and just to clarify, neither Devin or me are telling you to sell both your cars or
Yeah.
even one of your cars necessarily.
Yeah.
But one of the places where people have way too much of their net worth and value invested is in a car, right? You don't need a new car. A lot of people will say, don't buy a new car until you're a millionaire, right? Or until you have a net worth of $1 million. And I don't make a hard rule about that. But what I will say is you lose so much money off of buying a new car. Your car depreciates 10% off of the lot if you buy a new car, and a total of 20 to 30% the first year that the car gets bought if it's new. So let somebody else take that hit. Even if you're in a great financial situation, get a 3 to 5 year old car and save a ton of money. It's just like, how important is that new car smell? For me, it's not, but some sacrifices my wife and I made. We have one car because I actually sold my Honda Accord for, it was a sad day, 11 years. And it was a very emotional departure because I didn't want to sell it, but it just made sense. I mean, it was a 2011 Honda Accord with like 155,000 miles on it, and I got like $5,000 for it in Hawaii. But I mean, the amount I would get for it there versus anywhere else is way more just because of the cost of cars. So that was kind of our smart move of let's just sell it. And again, now we only have one car. It's a 2016 Mazda 3 with over 100,000 miles on it. And with our income, we could definitely afford much more car. But for us, that's just not something we value. And we're prioritizing investing. We're prioritizing going on vacations now that we're out of debt and enjoying our time together as a married couple. Just don't spend so much money on a car because it's one of the few large purchases that loses value. Unlike a home should appreciate over time, over several years, right? Your car is constantly losing value when you buy it.
Yeah.
And so I think staying away from big car purchases and then loans and interest rates on a car, if you can buy a car for cash, even if it's settling on a little bit less expensive vehicle, then you're avoiding any interest on the car. That's a huge money saver. And then the biggest thing definitely to avoid is leasing a car. Leasing a car is the most expensive way to have a car. Don't look at the math. Well, you can, but if you look at the math, you're going to be pretty disgusted of the cost of owning that same car versus buying a few-year-old version of it. So yeah, just avoid the leases, man. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like side story, I remember I was biking to work one day. My bike basically broke down on the side of the road. And one of my coworkers decided, hey, I'll come pick you up. I'm like, all right, perfect. So jump into his car. He's got a nice BMW coupe, right? He's like our age. And I'm like, oh man, how much was this car? And he's like, well, I don't own it. I lease it. I'm like, oh, okay. And well, what's the monthly lease on something like this? Oh, it's around 1,500 a month. And I'm just like,
My gosh.
yeah, my jaw dropped farther than yours did, Josh. And I was like, dude, you're $1,500 a month. That's more than my mortgage payment. And I'm not kidding you. At the time, I used that $10,000 that I sold my car for. I got $10,000 for it, right? And I turned around and me and my wife decided to buy a small condo in Waikiki. It was $200,000 for that condo, right? So that $10,000 down payment was great. The monthly payment on that mortgage was $1,000 a month. My homeowners association fees for that condo at the time was $400 a month. So in total, my mortgage fixed expenses, right, was consolidated into $1,500 a month. So I had a fixed rent now off that $10,000 I used. And it was basically buying me real estate in Hawaii at the same price that this guy was leasing a BMW for per month.
That's nuts.
It's mind blowing, man. It just goes to show how much the lifestyle creep is real, right? Like we talk about, and making sure that don't just try and keep up with the Joneses by getting a BMW at 30 years old. Even you can't afford it. $1,500 a month. You cannot afford that. No matter how even if I was making $1 million a year, I still wouldn't want a $1,500 a month payment on a car, man. So
What I look at too, immediately when you said 1500, I haven't done the math yet, but if you run the numbers on putting in 1500 for however many months he did it, right, for like 3 years, and you just left that money invested in a simple index fund, you'd probably have several $100,000, maybe close to $1 million if you left it in there for 30 years, right? So the cost benefit analysis too. One thing my wife and I like to talk about is sometimes you have to say no to something now to say yes to something later. And so maybe your no to a really nice car now because you don't value that as much is your yes to some super bougie vacations later when you guys can afford it. Sometimes you got to say no now to say yes later so you can enjoy the life that you really want to live.
Josh, I know you have made some sacrifices to live in Hawaii as well. So what are some sacrifices you and your wife made in order to thrive in Hawaii?
My story was kind of similar. When I initially moved myself, I moved with just a backpack, 2 suitcases, and my electric guitar because that had to come too. But I shipped the Honda Accord I talked about. I shipped for about $2,800 from Illinois to Hawaii because finding a reliable car in Hawaii for $2,800 is pretty stinking challenging. There's good luck, right?
Yeah,
It's dang near impossible unless you got a real nice friend. And so that was a huge sacrifice of just being like, okay, you know what? This car's old, but it's been really reliable. And having a Toyota, Honda, etc. car that's reliable and has a good reputation is huge too. But housing was definitely the biggest hurdle. We talked about the amount of rent and what that looked like. And initially the plan was when I moved, I had these guys I was talking to from a church that I was going to attend once I got there. And the original plan was there was going to be 3 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment. So I'm like, great. Okay. I can share the space, but I'll have my own room. But basically what ended up happening is I get there and we end up living in a 3-bedroom apartment with 5 guys because there's some other guys needed some help too, just like me. And so I was like, oh my gosh. So you've heard about like housemates of people being in your house, but I had a roommate as a grown adult. And shout out to Soma and Andrew, but specifically Soma because he let me sleep in his room and take over part of his space. But what it allows me to do is in Hawaii, I was living pretty close to work and paid $800 to $900 a month, which gave me a ton of room in my budget to be able to invest, save for the future, but also save for, I knew my wife and I's relationship was getting more serious and I knew the debt that she was bringing forth too. And I wanted to be able to tackle that right away when we got married. And so I was able to save for that as well. And I think the housing thing is huge, especially in Hawaii. It's so challenging, but housing can eat up your entire budget if you let it. And a good rule of thumb is to have around 25% of your take-home pay going towards the house. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but just doing the math and doing the ratios, if you have 40 to 50% of your income tied up in just your housing, it's going to be really hard to have the margin to do what you want to do, whether that's vacation, whether that's spending on other categories that you enjoy, tackling debt, right? And so the 25 is a good place to start and consider how much house can I afford or rent, right? And so, for example, if you're bringing home around $4,000 after taxes as either a single person or as your household, then your housing costs should be around $1,000 of what you're spending. Because again, if you're going a whole lot higher than this, you're going to be spending way too much on a roof over your head as opposed to having the margin to do what you want in your life.
Yeah, man, exactly. Like I feel we both had intentions on a monthly plan with some relatively strict percentages, like 25%. I agree. I think that's a great number to go off from, which allows you to start looking at creating a margin of additional money that you can use later on to enjoy things like hiking and surfing and boat tours and eating out. And if you don't have that, we always talk about side hustles. So let's get into some side hustles and how we also not only made some sacrifices in Hawaii, but we also did some side hustles to make additional money.
Yeah, so some of the side hustles I specifically did were I started DoorDashing a little bit in the beginning, but then found that me doing overtime as a PT, at least when it was available, was way more cost effective. And so I did some extra hours as a physical therapist too when they were offering it, because overtime was time and a half. And then my favorite one definitely was helping people with their money, sitting down one-on-one and being able to help people. And initially that was just for free, but then being able to help people as a paid service because I continued to see see how valuable this was for helping people's lives, their stress levels, and just how happy they were was so amazing. What about you, Devin? Did you do any other side hustles to make some cash?
Yeah, definitely. I did some Uber for a little bit, one just for the experience so I can meet people. I think I also looked at Uber as a fun opportunity to, okay, who's going to get in this car? And then, okay, what am I going to talk about? Right. So, you come in contact with in Hawaii with some very amazing people, some very strong professional people, high level business people. And you just get to sit there in an Uber and pick their brain, like they're wanting to talk to you. Right. And so I took that as like, this is my advantage to learn from other people, but I'm also going to just make some side hustle cash with it. Right. So I looked at it as an opportunity for two different things. But another thing was renting out my couch on Airbnb. And so that was just huge opportunity, but also just whole new world into how you can generate some side hustle income. And I always go back to a wise man once told me, it's not about how you leverage your time, it's about how you leverage your money, right? And Warren Buffett also once said, if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. So I gave it some thought and asked my wife, I was like, hey, I'd like to try renting out our couch on Airbnb. And she was like, oh, that's crazy. Like there should be people living like right in our living room. And I'm like, well, here, let me show you what we could make. Right. So I dangled that carrot over her head. It was basically $50 a night we could start off. Right. So it turned out we rented that for 20 nights out of the month. Right. So we had 10 nights to ourselves, 20 nights not to ourselves. We generate $1,000 in extra cash. And so that truthfully was a eye-opening moment where my wife's like, all right, let's do it. And we had a lot of fun. We got to meet a lot of people from all over the world and generate about $1,000 a month in side hustle cash. So
Yeah, that's definitely an incredible way. When we started doing this episode, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know they were like in your home. That's wild. But I mean, $1,000 a month, that's pretty hard to argue with, right? And so, guys, we're not saying go rent your couch. Like you have to do that. We're also not saying you have to DoorDash. We're also not saying you have to help people with their money, right? But find your skill set and use that to make you some money on the side, especially if you're trying to pay off debt. I feel like that's the biggest reason we're going to suggest side hustles often is just to give you the freedom to get out of debt, stop paying interest on student loans, credit cards, whatever it is.
yeah, like Airbnb side hustle, it could be a great way to help pay your monthly rent or mortgage, but I don't suggest doing this right off the bat until you have full control over your finances. Essentially, you should be looking at this as like, okay, my finances are in control, my fixed expenses are in control. What can I do in my spare time now to make money? Everything's controlled. My budget is in place. Now I've got free time. What do I do with that free time? And that time should be leveraged, right? Leverage in a way where you can get money from that, put it towards future investments and continue to move forward.
Yep. And I think it's important to differentiate. A lot of people like to use leveraging money as if you're taking out this massive amount of debt against yourself on a house, this and that. And we're not talking about leveraging a bunch of money and taking out these massive loans to get the job done, but how can you find creative ways with your time, and investing is part of that too, but to also just make some side hustle money. So well, quick reminder, guys, if you need help with your finances, whether it's tackling student loans, credit card debt, budgeting, or making your money work for you, we are here for you. Schedule a free one-on-one consult at fiscalclinician.com or using the scheduling link in the description.
Before we close out this episode, we want to provide our audience with some key financial takeaways.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest takeaways from today's episode are just monthly planning, creating a written budget for the month, looking also at the previous month of spending and figuring out how did we do? Was that a successful month? And did that line up with our values, right? Because the biggest thing is we want you guys to be able to do what you love. And so we want your money to reflect you doing the things you love. And so does that last month reflect the things that you're passionate about and the things that you want to spend your money on? Initially, when you're building a budget though, I would definitely focus on those fixed expenses first, the housing, food, utilities, all of that good stuff, cars, if you're having a car payment, and then try to work around dedicating around 25% to your housing, whether that's rent or whether that's a home, just to have margin in your life to do other things. The other thing is creating an intentional plan for your groceries every month, going in with a list and going in with a plan, having already taken inventory of what you have at home.
So along with creating an intentional budget, the other thing is to make sure that you're making some sacrifices, small sacrifices if possible, because lifestyle creep is super real. We're not trying to keep up with the Joneses here. We're trying to set stones. We're trying to set the foundation correctly and make some small sacrifices where we can, so we can free up some side cash. So we can take that cash and either invest it, or we can choose to put it in our savings for future things like vacations and fun things. And again, look at buying a used car. Don't look at leasing a car if at all possible. Try to start with buying a used car, and then, keep that shiny new car in the future still in your mind, so it has something you can work towards.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think finding side hustles and using the skills that you have, you're often probably going to find that you can create some kind of side hustle that makes great money. I have a friend who's like baking and selling cookies now, and they're making great money off of that. It could be whatever your skill set is, just find something, right? And at the end of the day, you just need a plan for your money, for your groceries, for everything. And this is where we can help. So if you're a healthcare professional feeling stuck with your finances, unsure on where to get started, you are not alone. We've been there, and we're here to help you get out of debt, build wealth, and work towards financial independence. So you can check us out at fiscalclinician.com to schedule a free consult, or check out Fiscal Clinician on Instagram and TikTok. And Devin, where can our listeners find you as well?
Yeah, so if you're out in Hawaii or on the West Coast, you can also link up with me on my Instagram. My handle is going to be Health and Wealth Hawaii. And if you want to link up there to schedule a session with me, you're more than welcome to. And thanks again for tuning in to the Fiscal Clinician Podcast. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with a friend, a clinician, or a coworker who really needs it.
Yeah, next week we're going to be diving deep into the details of how we start a monthly budget, how to break down the budget into categories, and how to help you stay on track. So tune in next time. You are not going to want to miss it.